Yeah. Shoulder day. We're gonna do some fun stuff here. A little bit different. Add some different ammunition to your arsenal of exercises. So, lately I've been just reminding you to do your warm-up, which includes rotator cuff. But since it's shoulder day, we'll go ahead and we'll incorporate that into today's workout. My Maverick, if you're looking for a new hydration product, it's more than electrolytes, full spectrum multivitamin mineral blend. You can shop here on the link. Today's video is sponsored by Maverick. Let's start, even before we grab the bands here, start with my favorite, some arm circles. Nice and controlled, going forward. So not only is this obviously good warm-up, good for strengthening, conditioning those small stabilizer muscles that we call our rotator cuff, but it's a good way to start to fire up those muscles. Get everything warm, even pre-fatigue just a little bit. I do a few more. And then we're going to reverse it here. We're going to go backwards. I'm just waiting for them to really start to burn, honestly. I'm not even counting these. I don't care how many I do. It's more of a feel thing. You notice I say that a lot. Firm believer that the magic isn't in just the number of reps you do or the number of exercises or number of sets. It's learning how to tune in, how to feel. It's what we call mind muscle connection. Really, all that means is a bit of focus and discipline with your training, learning how to zero in on things. And then the other part of feeling is working that muscle till it's exhausted. You know, what's the point of doing 10, 11, or 12 reps if, you know, you got 3, 4, 5 more reps left in the tank? Oh, man. All right. Those things are already starting to light up. So I'm looking for. So now we're going to do some internal, external rotation. If you haven't seen me do this before, a lot of times people just come in here with a band, keeping that elbow tight to the body. That's external rotation. The opposite, again, elbow close to the body. And this is internal rotation. I don't have the patience or the time to sit there, do both separate, both arms. It just takes way too long for me. So I'll come in here, take something like the band, workout towel, whatever. Palms facing each other, elbows tight to the sides, using the opposite arm to resist. And now we are working external rotation, internal rotation at the same time. Much more time efficient. And if it's more time efficient, there's a greater chance of you doing this more consistently. And that's the key to it. Make it part of your routine. But if it's some fucking to-do where you got to come in and spend 30 minutes trying to warm up your shoulders, I don't know about you, but I just don't have time for that. Like by the time I finish my warm-up, I'd be ready to go home. All right, a few more. Now anchor that band under the feet. Actually, I'm going to drop down, go a little bit lighter with this. Give everything a chance to warm up. My left shoulder is still bugging me, so. All right, keeping those elbows in one position. Rotate back. This one right here is probably one of the more helpful ones for me. It's also the one that's the most uncomfortable for the first couple reps. But it really helps me start to loosen those muscles up. Nice. All right, real quick light stretch. Bring that arm across the body. And then we're going to dive into our first exercise. This one, I think, is probably one of the more unique shoulder presses that I've ever done because it hits all three heads of the deltoid a little more even. So in a traditional shoulder press, doesn't matter how you do it, to the front, behind the neck, dumbbells, barbell, machine, it doesn't matter. When we externally rotate like this, we're putting the anterior delt in a very strong position here. So it becomes very anterior delt or front of the shoulder dominant. So a lot of people say it's 60 to 70% anterior delt, somewhere between 20 to 30% middle delt, and maybe 5 to 10% rear delt. But we're going to change that here. And I'll show you what I got planned for us. So I'm going to anchor down low. You could go even lower if you want. I just happen to have this anchor point right here. This is the Undersun universal anchor. So it's got this nice neoprene padding on it. Makes the band last longer. But here's what we're going to do. We are stepping away from our anchor point. So now, as we press up, we are having to counter this resistance trying to pull our hands and our arms forward. So it's making the rear delt fire. I even feel it places a little more attention on the middle deltoid. So now instead of this being just anterior delt dominant, we're making all three heads fire. Oh, control that rep speed. Eight, 9, 10, 11, 12. I think you'll find that that feels completely different than your traditional shoulder press. Now, you may not feel super strong in that position, but that's okay. That's not the goal. The goal is trying to work the shoulders or the deltoids a little more uniformly. Now, I still want to say that it's probably going to be a little anterior delt dominant, but it doesn't feel that way. When I'm doing those, I actually feel that much more in middle and rear delt. Those are the ones that are really firing up. So, it'd be interesting to see what that actual split looks like, but, what it would look like on paper or maybe in a lab, a science lab, is different than the way it's going to maybe feel here in a gym. And that's where I go by feel. Where do I feel it? That's more important to me. All right. That actually felt pretty good. I could add maybe a small band to it, or I could step a little further back. Now, if I step back, that's probably going to make those rear delts fire even more. So the more tension I'm creating in this direction, front to back, the more those rear delts are firing. Think about what they're doing at the most basic level, right? Let's oversimplify this. Our anterior delt is going to help raise our arm forward. Middle delt, arm out to the side. Rear delt is going to go backwards. So think about that force pulling us forward. So we're having to resist that, and that's going to make those rear delts really fire. That's not necessarily my goal. So I think I'm just going to add another band into it. You can stack bands just like you would free weights. Now, another thing that's going to change the dynamic of the exercise is how low or high you anchor this. The higher you anchor it, the more our resistance, plane resistance, is going to be more horizontal. It's going to make the rear delts fire more. If you anchor it lower, it's going to start to feel more like a traditional press. Here we go. That's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, one more. Nice. So we got one more set. I think if I were to set this up again, I would probably anchor it a little bit lower. Right now, this is a very, very strong contraction in the rear delts. If I anchor it lower, some of that's going to come back more to the front of the shoulder. But you get to play around with it. That's the cool thing about it, is there's not too many exercises where you can really shift attention from front to back. It's very difficult with free weights like a dumbbell, because our plane of resistance is just straight up and down. Here, by changing our anchor height, we're changing that plane of resistance from maybe a steeper plane to a more horizontal plane. Besides more well-rounded development, we want our shoulders to be well-rounded from front, side to back, but also helps with posture. Someone with a lot of anterior development, not enough in the back, you'll kind of start to see that in their posture. It starts to kind of roll forward a bit. Now, I was going to change my shirt because, honestly, feeling a little thick in the waist lately here. I was telling Mike that, I was telling my wife that one of our Dobermans was looking a little thick in the waist, so we were wondering how much she weighed. So I stepped on the scale first, so then I could weigh her, subtract the difference. Well, turns out I'm the one who's a little thick in the waist right now. Compared to this time last year, I am 22 pounds heavier right now, and it's not the right kind of 22 pounds. We're talking about wearing looser shirts. But you know what? I'm going to wear the tighter shirt so I can look in the mirror and I can look at this video footage and use that as motivation to get my shit together. You don't want to hide from it. Then you're just fooling yourself. All right, let's control that rep speed. That's also going to make this more challenging. That's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Oh man. Step back. 12. All right, that set my shoulders on fire. Oh, that's a good one. All right, we're going to move to a focus on middle delts. So here's something to keep in mind, and this relates to what we were just talking about with anterior delt. So if we were to highlight the different bellies, right? So you have your anterior delt that's here in the front. Here's middle delt. So it would make sense that if we're doing shoulder presses here, that we're working more middle delt. That's not the case. Why? Well, watch what happens here. So we have anterior delt here in the front. Now, as I rotate my arm backwards to do a shoulder press, now look at the position of the anterior delt. It's a very strong position here, and that's why it ends up very dominant in this movement. So if we want to put more focus on the middle delt, that's where we keep our hands or our arms in a more neutral position. That's why we end up doing side raises or lateral raises. So what else can we do to work the middle delt? Well, that is where your upright row comes in. Now, the traditional way of doing it with a bar, I don't like. That's a closed chain exercise. That means we're all locked in. The distance between my two hands is locked in. And this can have a tendency to put a lot of pressure on some people's joints, where it's wrist, elbow, or even shoulder. But I do like doing them with dumbbells. The key is just not doing an exaggerated range of motion. But if you look at a good effective range of motion for middle delt for lateral raises really is about to there. So now imagine if it's an upright row, same thing. So it's from here just to there. So we don't need to go crazy heavy with these. What we want to focus on is not pulling with the hands, and that's a mistake I used to make when I used to use like an easy curl bar or even a straight bar. I was always just thinking about pulling my hands up. No, we don't want to think about pulling the hands up. It's almost the opposite of what we talk about with a lat pull down, where we think about our hands as hooks and our forearms. Same thing. Hands, forearms, they're just hooks holding onto the dumbbell. We're thinking about bringing those elbows up. So that's where you want to put your focus. That's our mind-muscle connection drill for this exercise. Think about elbows. Start off really light. So this is our starting position. Not here. Bring your arms out just a little bit. Right there. And you can bring them to a neutral position here at the bottom. A little pause at the top. Control the eccentric. Control concentric. Squeeze at the top. And back down. This is where it's helpful to look in the mirror. Just think about where you're initiating that movement. Are you initiating the movement at the hands, pulling your hands up, or are you initiating it at the elbow? That's 15, but I'm going to keep going here. I went a little light with these. Oh, yeah. Nice. It's good stuff. So this next set, just for fun, we'll bring the bands into it. And it gives a totally different feeling, not just because we're adding the variable resistance of bands, but because of the angle of our resistance. You'll see here in a second. Grab your fat grips if you have them. And I'm going to grab the smallest band that I have. Right through. So, for this first one, I might even go super light. So you're going to have to adjust these a little bit. So see that distance there in the middle? So I step on this. I don't just have resistance in this vertical plane from the band. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull them apart a little bit. So I'm starting here where the dumbbells are close together, and then as I come up, it's stretching that band in the middle as well. So now I've got a resistance in that horizontal plane as well. Eight. Let's go to 12. 10. 11. One more. So that feels completely different. And you notice I went down in resistance with the dumbbell, and I'm using the smallest band that I have, and that was still harder. It's good stuff. Should mess around with it. Like, for example, this last one, it's not even using dumbbells at all. Just use a band. And I think you'll find that even that feels different than the first two variations. So you can take one movement and work the muscle differently with each. So, let's see how this feels. And remember, if you need more tension, you can do a couple things. You can widen your stance. That's going to stretch the band more. You can also grab the band lower, take some of that slack out. That's going to create more tension. But let's see how this feels. That's 8. 9. 10. 12. Whew. All right. So you'll hear me talk a lot about how you initiate a movement. So with this movement, I could initiate it 3 different ways, and they all look pretty much the same. I said the same thing about rows the other day. I could initiate this. Let me grab a really light set of dumbbells. So I'm going to look in the mirror. It'll help me. I could initiate this with the hands. So it's going to start here, then elbows. I could initiate it the right way for this particular exercise with the elbows first, or I could initiate it here with the trapezius, and that's what I see a lot of people do when they try to go really heavy with these. You'll notice them shrugging. So shrug and then elbows come up. So we don't want the trapezius to take over in this movement. This is an attempt to focus more on the middle deltoid. So think about not shrugging the shoulders, being very disciplined, just bringing those elbows up. Now, I have done variations where I intentionally was trying to work the trapezius, so driving with the elbows and then a squeeze at the end. So it just really depends on what your goal is, but if you want to focus more on middle delt, try to avoid shrugging. Now, if you want, let's call it a little bit more of a compound movement, and you want more overall development up here, including the trapezius, then yeah, shrug all you want. I felt good. I liked it. Now, here's something that I don't do a lot of. Used to, probably the first 10 years of my training, I used to do a lot of front raises. Why do I not do them now? Well, because most of the shoulder work I do, I'm already working a lot of anterior delt. Not everybody, but most. If you're doing a lot of pressing movements, chest press, dumbbell, or whether it's dumbbell or bench press, doesn't matter. That's a lot of anterior delt, especially when you get into upper chest, even more anterior delt, and of course our shoulder presses. So after a while, I realized that my anterior delts were overdeveloped. They didn't need any kind of isolation work. But since our first exercise was focusing a bit more on rear delt, a little bit of middle, now we just focus more on middle delt. We can come in here and do an isolation exercise just for the front of the shoulder. So you can do these with bands, can do them with dumbbells. I happen to like them better with bands. It's easier on my shoulder, plus I feel a better contraction. So starting right here at the front, straight up till my arms are about parallel with the floor. There's no need to go higher than that. Right now there's this trend towards exaggerated ranges of motion, what I would call extreme ranges of motion. Not only do I think they're not necessary from a muscle development perspective, I think there's also a very high chance of impingement. And so to me, the reward isn't worth the risk. But I tell people, try it for yourself. One more. Nice. Let's bring those arms across the body. Oh man, just got a nice gut shot there. I was saying earlier, you can't run from it. Matter of fact, for me, The only time I really create change in my life is when I reach a level of dissatisfaction where I just can't fucking take it anymore. And that's when I finally act. So sometimes I'll use that to my advantage. And if something makes me really uncomfortable, like right now, not feeling so great about wearing a really tight tank top, that's why I'll just embrace it and use that dissatisfaction to get me into gear, to do something about it. It's like that old story about Arnold. I don't know if it's true or not. I know that one of his weaker body parts was his calves at one point. And so instead of just wearing long pants and hiding his calves, he took all his sweatpants and he cut the bottom of them off at the knee, where he had to stare at him in the mirror all the time, and that motivated him to train him more. Like naturally, we all have a tendency to want to show off body parts that are strong and hide weak ones. But if you really want to change, you got to do the opposite. All right. We can do the same thing with dumbbells. I'll show you how I do them here. It's slightly different. With resistance bands, I have tension all the way through the range of motion, especially at the beginning of the range of motion from here. Even here, I have tension. With dumbbells, it's really easy to bring them to the sides here and then swing them. And like, I don't feel this in the muscle at all. This is just kind of like a swing. And it's easy to generate a lot of momentum and use heavy weight and try to sling it up. That's a no-go. So I like to start with the dumbbells out in front of me, create tension here at the beginning of the range of motion, and it's a nice controlled contraction. Squeeze at the top and controlled eccentric, stopping just short. Now there's no momentum, there's no swinging. Eight, 9, 10. So I remember kind of in my late teens, I'd been training for a couple years. I was training with someone who was a lot more experienced, and we were doing these. He said, hold it at the top. And he was yelling at me every single rep, hold it at the top. I was like, I can't. He's like, I know you can't because you're trying to go too heavy. So that's where you have to, be honest with yourself. If you can't control it, just check your ego, man. Just drop down. There's nothing wrong with that. What's your goal? Is your goal just to try to fucking look cool and sling heavy weight, or is your goal to go in there and get a really effective workout? Can't give a shit what anyone around you thinks. You're not there to impress them. All right, so that was nice. I like that. But truth be told, I prefer the band. You can start doing fun stuff too. This band's probably a little too heavy for it, but come in here. Oh, that definitely wasn't using that for the other set. So I can do a front raise, and then I have resistance here in the horizontal plane, so then I can work rear delts into it. Matter of fact, let's just do it for fun. That's 3. Oh, man. 9. 10. Let's get 2 more. 11. Nice. Good stuff. All right, so we've already attacked the delts front to back. Just work a little bit of traps, and we'll call it a day. So I said this last week's workout. I don't go crazy heavy with shrugs anymore. I don't think you need to if you use really good technique. So I prefer, it's my personal preference, try it for yourself. I prefer to lean forward just slightly. And then I'm not just squeezing straight up, squeezing back just a little bit. I like the range of motion. I like the contraction that I get, but try it for yourself. Don't let the shoulders roll forward. Keep them back, especially there at the top of the contraction. Turn around, face you. Look in the mirror. Now, one mistake I used to make, and it seems like such a small detail, but I do think it's important. When I would look in the mirror, I would watch the dumbbells, and I was concerned about how much those dumbbells were moving up and down. And what would happen is as I would shrug, I would have a tendency to bend at the elbow a little bit. Now I'm using biceps to pull it a little bit. It doesn't matter how much that dumbbell moves. What matters is at the shoulder. So don't put your focus on your hands. Don't put your focus on the dumbbells. Focus on those shoulders. And as they say, squeezing up towards your ears. Definitely make sure, stretch, bring that ear closer to the opposite shoulder, holding on to something. Remember, your trapezius, what gives you the shape, as that's coming up here into almost the back of the skull. And so when that muscle gets tight and all that connective tissue gets tight back in here, that can give you a nasty headache if you're not stretching that out. Took me a long time to figure out that very simple thing. I just think, man, every time I do traps, I just get such a horrible headache. But then again, I was also extremely lazy when it came to stretching and just doing some of the basic conditioning that I should have been doing. It's like I would just go into my workouts completely cold, never warm up. There was no stretching in between sets. All right, here we go. So slight lean forward. So again, when I'm looking in the mirror, I'm not looking at those dumbbells at all. Looking at how much movement at the shoulder. Here, show it from behind, kind of more like a 3/4 angle. Good stuff. Only have one more set of these and we're done. Except I'm going to come back tonight, hit the rowing machine. That I can promise you. I'm not super big on stepping on a scale all the time, but sometimes it's a good wake-up call. It's easy to fool yourself. You look in the mirror, you're like, oh yeah, you know, look a little fuller, get bigger. Get bigger, all right. It's not in the right places. That's where we fool ourselves with the whole bulking and cutting. The goal should be to try to stay relatively lean and healthy year round and just gradually add muscle as you can. Sure, when you bulk, do you look bigger? You do. But, you know, at some point when you decide to cut, the reality is a lot of that mass that you think you've accumulated, you end up losing in the cut. So the only thing that really happened different than if you would have stayed lean and just more gradually tried to make gains. The only difference is with a bulk and a cut, you look like shit half the year. All right, last set. Let's do this. Bulking and cutting just makes for better YouTube content, I find. Lean forward a little more. There it is. Same thing, get that squeeze. Here. Nice. All right. That's a wrap. So I will see you Monday. We're going to come back in here and bust out a chest triceps workout.